The Golden State Warriors hold the 11th pick in the 2026 NBA Draft, and the names at the top of their wish list are becoming clearer by the day. Two Michigan forwards, Yaxel Lenderborg and Adey Mara, have emerged as the most discussed prospects among Warriors fans and analysts alike. But a closer look at the draft board suggests that only one of them has a realistic shot at landing in San Francisco. Hey, what's up, everyone? Before we jump into everything today, that like button right there is what decides if this video hits hundreds or thousands of people. 1 second is all it takes, but the impact on this channel is massive. Go ahead and hit that like button right now. Seriously, it's the simplest thing you can do. And honestly, the best way to back this content up, because every single like pushes us further. So hit it now. Let's start with Mara, the big man who turned the NBA combined into a one-man showcase. At 7 feet 3 inches without shoes and 260 pounds, Mara is not just physically imposing. He moved through agility and shooting drills with fluency that scouts rarely see from players his size. The 21-year-old Spanish center quickly became a consensus winner of the Combine, and that performance has dramatically changed his draft stock. Before Chicago, there were debates about exactly where he might land. After it, the question shifted to whether he would even make it past the top 5. The Clippers pick 5th, and they face a pressing need at center after trading away Ivica Zubac to the Indiana Pacers. Mara projects as a longer-term answer at that position, and some analysts give him a 40% chance of being selected in Los Angeles. The Brooklyn Nets at pick 6 have Nick Claxton under contract for 2 more years, but could still justify moving on from him for a younger, higher-ceiling option like Mara. That probability sits around 33%. The Atlanta Hawks at pick 8 have center Onyeka Okongwu on the books, but if the teams ahead of them grab guards and wing players, Mara may be the best player available when Atlanta's turn comes. The Milwaukee Bucks, selecting at number 10, represent perhaps the most dangerous threat to Golden State's hopes. Milwaukee is heading into a rebuilding phase, likely moving on from Giannis Antetokounmpo and Miles Turner this summer. Picking the best player available, regardless of position, would be their logical approach. If Mara is still on the board at 10, the Bucks are seen as 50-50 to take him. When you total the cumulative probability of Mara being drafted before the Warriors get a chance to call his name, the implied odds of him reaching pick 11 sit at just around 10%. That is not good news for Golden State. Lenderborg's situation is considerably more favorable for Warriors fans. The 23-year-old Michigan forward put together an excellent showing at the NBA Combine as well, following his teammates' footsteps and elevate his profile in the process. But his age is the sticking point. Of the 10 teams selecting ahead of the Warriors, only the Clippers and the Hawks are currently positioned as contenders seeking immediate reinforcements. The other 8 organizations are in various stages of rebuilding or retooling, and for those teams, a 23-year-old prospect carries a lower ceiling than a player several years younger with similar skills. Teams in long-term rebuild mode tend to prioritize players who can grow alongside young cores. The Clippers are given just a 5% chance of selecting Lenderborg, as they have bigger needs at center and guard. The Nets, at 2%, are firmly focused on finding younger talent to build around Igor Demon. The Sacramento Kings at pick 7 present essentially no threat, as Lenderborg would overlap heavily with the existing skill set of Keegan Murray. The Hawks present the most credible risk, sitting at a 15% probability, particularly if the teams ahead of them address the center position and leave Atlanta looking for forward help. Lenderborg at the 4 could complement Jalen Johnson, but the Hawks already have players like Jonathan Kuminga and Zachary Rizicher developing in similar roles, which complicates the fit. The Dallas Mavericks at 9 and the Bucks at 10 each have a 10% or lower likelihood of taking Lenderborg, as both franchises will almost certainly prioritize younger and more upside-laden prospects. There is one notable wild card in the equation. The Oklahoma City Thunder hold the 12th pick, and there is a reasonable scenario in which they trade up to number 10 specifically to grab Lenderborg before Golden State can. OKC has the assets and the front office track record to make that kind of aggressive move. Warriors fans will be wise to keep that possibility in mind. Adding it all up, Lenderborg's odds of sliding to the Warriors at pick 11 are estimated at roughly 75%, a striking contrast to Mara's 10%. For Golden State, that reality shapes how they approach the coming weeks. Lenderborg represents something close to a likely outcome. Mara would be a minor miracle. The Warriors are not expected to sit still between now and draft night. They have been active in exploring trade scenarios that could reshape the roster around Stephen Curry for what may be the final years of his prime. But the draft represents a quieter, less disruptive path toward adding a young building block at reasonable cost. Lenderborg at 11 would give them a versatile, experienced forward with proven college production. Whether Golden State can build something meaningful with that piece, or whether bigger moves define their offseason, remains a central question heading into the summer. Brandon Podziemski had a difficult third season with the Golden State Warriors. His scoring numbers fluctuated, his role in the offense was inconsistent, and there were stretches where the 23-year-old guard appeared lost within the team's broader struggles. Despite all of that turbulence, at least one Eastern Conference team saw enough value in him to pick up the phone before the February trade deadline. According to a report from Adam Aronson of Philly Voice, the Philadelphia 76ers made an attempt to acquire Podziemski ahead of the February 5th deadline. The exact offer was never disclosed publicly. What is known is that the Warriors declined to move forward with the deal, and Podziemski remained in Golden State. The report adds an interesting footnote to what was already a chaotic trade period for the Warriors, one that ultimately ended with the acquisition of Kristaps Porzingis in exchange for Jonathan Kuminga and Buddy Hield. The fact that Philadelphia was interested in Podziemski is notable given the timing. At the point of the deadline, the 76ers were navigating a season defined by injury and uncertainty. General Manager Daryl Morey was steering the front office at that moment, though he was subsequently fired this past Tuesday. Former Warriors General Manager Bob Myers has now been brought in to oversee the search for a new president of basketball operations in Philadelphia. A detail that added a layer of irony to a story involving a player Myers never actually got to work with. Myers stepped down from the Warriors front office right before Golden State used the 19th pick of the 2023 draft to select Podziemski. Understanding why the 76ers wanted Podziemski requires understanding the salary constraints both teams were operating under. Philadelphia finished the regular season just $98,113 below the luxury tax line, an extremely thin margin that would have made any trade complicated. As a team below the tax line, Philly had flexibility, but there were still real incentives to stay under it given the long-term financial benefits of avoiding the repeater tax. Golden State, for its part, was operating as a first-apron team, meaning it was restricted in how much salary it could absorb back in any trade. The money in any potential deal would have had to align almost precisely. Podziemski's 2025-26 salary was $3.7 million. Jared McCain's was $4.2 million. Given those figures, the most plausible trade scenario, according to analysis at the time, would have been Philadelphia offering McCain for Podziemski. However, Morey ultimately went in a different direction, sending McCain to the Oklahoma City Thunder in exchange for 1 first-round pick and 3 second-round picks. That move off the table. Another possibility involved Andre Drummond, who was earning $5 million, potentially packaged with draft compensation to make the salaries align. But that scenario became moot almost simultaneously. The Warriors were completing the Porzingis trade, which addressed their center needs directly. Golden State's decision to keep Podziemski ultimately looks like the right call in hindsight. Consider what they were getting in return for holding on to him. Podziemski appeared in all 82 regular season games this past year, an extraordinary mark of durability on a team that saw Stephen Curry and Jimmy Butler combine to play just 81 games. Butler faces a lengthy recovery after tearing his ACL, and Moses Moody is also projected to miss significant time early next season. Kristaps Porzingis has been battling injury concerns that followed him through stints in Boston and Atlanta before arriving in San Francisco. In that context, a player who suits up every night is genuinely irreplaceable. His value goes beyond availability. After a rough mid-season stretch, Podziemski closed the year on a strong note. In March and April combined, he averaged 18.1 points per game while shooting 47.5% from the field and 39.7% from three-point range. That kind of production during the final stretch of the season, when teams are jockeying for playoff positioning and every game carries weight, speaks to his ability to elevate his game when it matters most. He also proved himself as a solid team defender with a knack for taking charges, a subtle but valuable skill that reflects both basketball intelligence and a willingness to put his body on the line. Those intangibles are not always visible in a box score, but coaching staffs notice them, and they add up over the course of a long season. Perhaps most importantly, Podziemski is now extension eligible this offseason. His 2026-27 salary of $5.7 million represents genuine value for what he provides. The Warriors are expected to extend him, locking in a player who has shown the ability to be a reliable starter and a clutch performer when healthy teammates are not available. All signs point to Podziemski remaining a Warrior for several more years, and after this past season, that looks more like an asset than a question mark. The Golden State Warriors enter this offseason with a clear mandate: find a star-caliber player to help Stephen Curry make one more deep postseason run. The names at the top of their target list are Giannis Antetokounmpo and Kawhi Leonard, but the latest reporting suggests that at least one of those pursuits is running into a significant wall, and Golden State may need to recalibrate its approach before summer is over. According to Clutch Points reporter Brett Siegel, early signals coming out of Los Angeles indicate that Clippers owner Steve Ballmer wants to extend Kawhi Leonard rather than move him. That is not what Warriors fans were hoping to hear. The team had been widely linked to Leonard as one of its primary offseason targets, and there was genuine optimism in some corners that a deal could come together. Siegel's report throws cold water on that scenario, at least for now. The natural question is why the Clippers appeared willing to discuss a trade at the February trade deadline, if the plan all along was to keep Leonard. According to Siegel, the honest answer is that they were never seriously entertaining offers. The Warriors made a last-minute push to acquire Leonard in the hours before the February 5th deadline, but those conversations reportedly never came close to a real deal. The Clippers, per the report, showed no genuine willingness to negotiate a trade with any team at the deadline. The entire episode, in retrospect, looks less like a near miss and more like a moment of mutual posturing with no serious intent on Los Angeles' side. Notably, those Warriors talks did not involve Draymond Green on Golden State's end. According to sources cited by Clutch Points, the Warriors were exploring a trade, but they weren't prepared to include one of their most important veterans to make it happen at that stage. What ultimately came out of the deadline period for Golden State was a trade of Jonathan Kuminga and Buddy Hield to land Kristaps Porzingis, a deal that reshaped the frontcourt but did not resolve the question of adding another high-end wing next to Curry. That question now dominates the off-season conversation. Siegel added an important caveat to the Leonard situation. What Kawhi himself wants will ultimately carry significant weight. If Leonard decides he wants out of Los Angeles and pushes for a trade to a team with genuine championship aspirations, Ballmer would very likely comply and deal him. That scenario cannot be ruled out entirely, and it is worth monitoring as the offseason develops. Leonard has a history of controlling his own destiny. He has done it before, most famously engineering his way from San Antonio to Toronto, then to Los Angeles. However, there is currently no indication that he is planning to make such a move. By all accounts, Leonard enjoys life in LA and is not actively seeking an exit from the Clippers. That leaves the Warriors with limited options in their search for elite help alongside Curry. The Antetokounmpo pursuit remains active, and a potential trade package involving the Warriors' 11th overall draft pick has been floated as part of what that deal could look like. But the Bucks would demand an enormous return for a two-time MVP who is still in his prime, and assembling that package without gutting the roster entirely is a delicate balancing act. Beyond those two names, the Warriors' trade market becomes murkier. Siegel noted that Boston Celtics guard Derek White has emerged as a potential option, though he may only become available if Boston acquires Antetokounmpo and reshuffles its backcourt in the process. Warriors forward Aaron Gordon of the Denver Nuggets has also been mentioned as a realistic target, though making the financial and roster math work between the two franchises is genuinely complicated. Denver would need assets that Golden State may not be willing to part with. The New Orleans Pelicans trade Murphy III was a target before the February deadline, and that interest has not disappeared. But New Orleans appears committed to keeping the 25-year-old wing as a cornerstone of its own future plans, making a trade unlikely without an extraordinary offer. The bottom line for Golden State is that the off-season path is narrowing faster than the front office would like. Making a substantial trade to upgrade next to Curry will almost certainly require parting with one of the team's larger contracts. With Jimmy Butler recovering from an ACL tear and Draymond Green's on-court production in noticeable decline, the uncomfortable reality is that dealing one of them, along with draft capital, may be the most viable way to bring in a player capable of elevating this team back to legitimate championship contention. Neither option is easy or without risk. But with Curry's prime window closing and the Leonard door apparently shut for now, the cost of standing still this offseason may ultimately prove far greater than the cost of making a hard decision.